So it's finally here. The Alpha 6400 is in, finally arrived. Been waiting for it forever, I guess, from when it was first released. Now, this is going to be a talking head video going over this particular camera. It's not really going to be an unboxing, and I'm not going to share a lot of user experience with it. I did get to test it out a little bit when I got early access to it, so I'll talk a little bit about that, share what I like, share what I didn't like, and give some final recommendations about this particular camera. So stay tuned. If you don't know me already, I go by That One Camera Guy. I do tutorials, guides, and reviews on Sony mirrorless equipment and gear. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you don't miss out on the latest content, and smash that like button because it always helps out my channel. Now, before I jump back to this being on a setup, I just want to let you know I've been filming with the 6400 right now with the Sigma 16mm f1.4 sort of handheld, just kind of moving around just to give you a vibe for how this looks like. Granted, there's no stabilization, which we'll talk about later, but let me go ahead and dive back into the actual video. I was invited out to the Sony Catalina event with other YouTube content creators, and I did get a chance to have early access and use with this particular camera. Now, granted, there's a cage on here, which I'll talk about later, I hope. And while we're out there, we got a chance to try it out. But for me personally, I didn't get to use it sort of in the environment that I'm used to, which is sports shooting. And that's usually when I get a chance to try it out. Okay.
You are good to go. Big step.
Same thing.
Yep.
Big step, lean back,
Yep,
and look
perfect.
to the right.
Yep.
Okay. What ended up happening was we saw a lot of seagulls, and I saw it too, and I was testing it out. I was using I had the 100 or 400 on it, and I was having a blast, but I was like, this is not really my kind of arena. You know, this is not what I usually shoot. And then vlogging really isn't my thing either. That's like not the main thing that I do. So it was really hard for me to make a good video. Now, I did make the video and I scrapped it. And this is no, you know, I want to say this before I get into it. I'm very glad and happy about what Sony's doing. And again, I'm very thankful I was invited to the event because it gives you the chance to network and meet other creators and you get to talk. That's always a great thing, and I think Sony with their B Alpha events, they're doing the right thing. They're really making some smart moves in that direction. But just FYI, you know, when we're invited to those events, as you already know, you know, they cover your travel expenses, your lodging, your food, and all these things. And so that's kind of the reason why I held off a little longer on wanting to talk about the camera until my own personal copy came in, because I didn't want those biases to affect me personally. I'm only going to talk on my behalf and not anybody else. But for me to not feel influenced by the fact that, hey, they took me out to this event to try out the camera. You get me? Now, I already have a bias for Sony because I own so much Sony cameras. I'd rather not have another one kind of come into fray or show up and bother me while I do my review. So that's why this isn't a review video. It's more of initial thoughts on it. So anyhow, I got the camera when I was there, and it felt like any other Sony camera. So whatever you use, it's going to be just like that. It feels very much the same. The only new thing is going to be the flippy screen that's going to sort of kind of trip you up a little bit. I'm glad they finally did it, and I'll talk more about that as I get off to it at the end. But again, Sony event, tried it out, test out the autofocusing a little bit, and here's sort of what I like. The flip out screen, I'm glad they finally did it. So when the flip up screen comes up, it comes up like this. It's going to take some getting used to, which I'll talk a little bit about, but I'm just glad you have the flip up screen now so you can compose yourself and frame yourself in your shots. Right now, I actually use two Alpha 6300s. I have one for an overhead shot when I need it, and then the 6300 over here records me in this video. So I use the cameras. Now I have to put a monitor on my 6300 because I can't see. I'm going to check it out and see if I can just swap them out. Maybe I can sell off my 6300s and just upgrade the 6400 in my little studio setup. It'd be much better. The other thing I really like what Sony did was they found a way to squeeze out more energy and keep the brightness on the screen up. So now the screen doesn't get dim when you shoot in 4K or in a high frame rate. I'm all for that. That's great, because I've always been bothered by that with the 6300 and 6500 whenever I'm shooting video during the daytime. It would always get dimmer. So I'm all for that. Fantastic. Good job there, Sony. The next thing is that I think the EU taxes or whatever is finally lifted, or what those requirements were, but it seems they have unlimited recording on here. I haven't been able to do a test, but I will do a test later on when it gets a little bit warmer and see how well it holds up compared to the other cameras, 6300 and 6500. Another thing that I do like is the updated autofocusing system when I got a chance to try it out. The ability to switch eyes, the ability to track subjects, the ability to touch the focus. Bar none, it's amazing. I can tell you right now, it looks really, really good. But is it enough that you should upgrade? That's going to be another video when I talk about that. But anyhow, it is really good. And I am going to be excited to test it out for my sports shooting because that's what I typically do. So I'm all up for that. So I'm very excited to test it out next week for sure and just shoot with the camera. I'm waiting for it. Now let's go over the things that let's go over the things I don't like about the camera. There's not too many things. It's really the screen placement, and that's the reason why this cage exists. Now, I would have preferred if the screen flipped out, it being kind of like a Canon EOS M50 flipping out over here. So if you wanted to interact with the screen, you weren't going to block the lens. So with the a6400, because the screen flips up, if you want to touch the focus, for example, like you want to adjust your focus, you have to be careful and not put your hand in front of the lens where that's going to go. So that becomes a problem. It also blocks the microphone. Or the microphone blocks the screen, which is what I noticed there. So when we were at the Sony event, they let us use these Manfrotto plates, which mount to the bottom, and you had to attach the microphone off to the side. I knew it wasn't going to work that way. It wasn't the best solution, and we were going to have to use a cage. I knew that from the get-go. So I'm just glad Sony gave us something to flip up, and they gave us a microphone port. We'll work with everything else, but I still would have preferred a flip-out screen to the side. But we'll see how things pan out over the next few months, how well everything turns out. So now with the cage, for example, which I can link this particular cage down below if you want to check it out. But we can just mount it to the side so it's away from the actual hot shoe. So now, if it'll go on there, so now the mic is away from the actual setup. And you've seen some of these already online, and it's great. We're all set to go. We can frame ourselves, see ourselves in the shot, and still get slightly better audio, right? So we're all good for that. Another thing that really I wish they wouldn't have done was the stabilization. They didn't include it inside of the camera. I think they could have done it, and I would have paid more money. I would have preferred an a6700 over the 6400, in my honest opinion. But what this does is it leaves the door open for an a6700, a7000, if that makes any sense. So are we going to see it 9 months from now? Are we going to see it in December? Now it's a camera that's going to have the stabilization. Because they place it at a 6400, they leave you in between the 6500 and 6300 having to make a decision. It's like, do you want the stabilization or not? What sucks about the 6500 is that it's not getting any of the updated stuff. Even though it's technically a higher number, you're not getting the updated autofocusing system. I don't think they're going to give that unlimited recording option. You're not getting the brighter screen in 4K and 120 FPS unless they change it. But you're not getting all those updated things. The things going for the 6500 is the deeper buffer, which is great for sports. This one has a slightly better buffer. I haven't had a chance to test it out yet, but I will and see if it bothers me or not. But I think it's like 40 raw files or something like that versus 100 or so on the a6500. So that's an area that that does irk me a little bit. But we'll see how it goes. I really wanted to use like my Sigma 16mm lens, and then I realized, oh yeah, I don't have any stabilization for handheld video. So it does kind of cause that problem. So now you're going to have to probably use a gimbal or whatever. You get the idea. You're going to have to find a workaround solution for it. Battery life, I will test it out more, but my initial impressions on it is that it's still fairly weak. But that's to be expected. They kept it to be the same size. I had to change the battery out like twice or 3 times while I was out at Catalina at the event. So granted, I was shooting in 4K and I had the screen brightness up. So I'll give it that at least. But you're definitely going to still need to bring some extra batteries. Let's jump into the final recommendations and just my final thoughts in general. I kind of mentioned them already. And just to be completely honest, I love the camera right now. I like what it has to offer. And I'll let you know later if I think you should get it or not. Not in this video, but a different video. It took them a while to get the flip-up screen. Now, I know they already had it here. But what I mean is it took them a while just to get it to happen. I think everyone's been asking for it. And so it's even with their full-frame bodies with like these, a flip-out screen. I know people are going to say it's like they don't need a flip-out screen. I get why you might not need a flip-out screen, but you might as well just include it if they can. And then if you don't want to flip out the screen, then just don't flip it out. Just leave it there. It's a stopgap camera. There's going to be another one out there. So that's what kind of frustrates me a little bit. I just kind of wish they would have. I think the IBIS, if they had dropped the IBIS on here, I think it would have been kind of like the whole package already. The last thing I want to mention is that the user interface needs work, especially because they kind of geared towards the vlogging community a little bit, and just kind of the user-esque nature of it. It's the same thing every year. Sony really needs to overhaul their user interface completely. So it has a touchscreen, but the problem is I can't change the settings. I can't change my shutter speed. I can't change aperture. I can't change ISO. Can't change white balance. Can't change anything. I have to go back into the menu. Canon, for whatever reason, if there's any time they can copy a company, I would try and emulate what they're doing here. I don't know if it's a patent that's preventing them from doing that or not, but you can just go ahead and touch and change shutter speed. You can change pretty much anything on the touchscreen. So when you're using it as a device, you can't do those things. You can't even change audio from here. You have to press the button back here. So I've memorized it. Like I know what to click, but it'll be harder for somebody who just jumps into the system. And I want to recommend more Sony cameras to people, but for people that are just starting, I tend to recommend Canon cameras. And so when my students always ask me, hey, what kind of camera should I get as a starting camera? And I ask them, hey, are you want to do photo and video? And that's usually the answer, both photo and video. I always recommend like a Canon 80D. Price point's great. Lens options are great. That's an issue here. There's not a lot of affordable lens options they're not all out there yet. But on the Canon side, even Nikon side, there's a lot of third-party choices, and the prices are much lower. But I think that this is getting to the point where I feel like this camera itself, I could start recommending to people. It's gotten to that point where I'm like, this could be the camera that I could start recommending to people that want to consider, that are looking for a first camera choice. I just want Sony to bring out some more first-party lens options on the APS-C side if they could. That'd be really great. I don't want to have to buy G-Master lenses to put on this tiny camera. Try to bring in some affordable sub $500, $400 lenses for their customer base. And I think that'll keep everybody happy. Even like the 10 to 18, for example, it's like $800. So if you wanted a vlogging lens, you need a 10 to 18, really, for a wide shot. That's $800. If you go on the Canon route, for example, when I got the EOS M50, I was able to get this lens for pretty cheap, like $300, the 11 to 22. There's the 10 to 18 if you're shooting on a Canon 80D. They're not the same lens. I know that, especially the aperture side of things, but they're ultra wide lenses and they're cheaper options for vlogging or for video if that's your thing. So that's going to do it for me in this video, folks. Let me know your thoughts on it. Did you pre-order it? Did your order come in? And if you have anything you're wanting me to test, let me know in the description down below. There'll be a review later on down the line and a comparison video or test with the other cameras. So I'm very excited for that. So don't forget to smash that like button, get subscribed, check out my other content. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace.
I left my heart in California. I let it go deep into the blue. I could be happy in California. I would be fine with just me and you. Now don't go